Hi everybody, this lesson today is going to cover lesson 1.2, which is on solving equations. Remember, as you are watching the video, make sure you are writing things down in your notes. You have your notes packet in front of you, you have your pencil in your hand, and you're writing things down so that you can remember how to do things when it's time to work these on your own. Okay, so this video is going to be covering equations, and equations is probably the most important thing that we do in all of algebra, so it's a really important concept. However, I will say that this page has 10 examples on it, and that's a lot of examples, and so this video is going to be called video A, and it's going to be required. There will be another video, which will be video B, which is going to be optional. So I wrote that over here, that video A is required. These are the numbers that we're going to do in this video. The next video is going to be optional. It will do the ones that we skip. And the reason for that is it is a very important concept, but some of you are decent at equations, and I just don't feel like you have to sit through every single problem if you already know how to do them. The reason there are as many there are because equations come in all varieties, and so we're going to try to touch on all the varieties that we can. So let's go ahead and get started in the notes. You should have this piece of paper in front of you. This is in your notes packet. You should have a pencil in your hand, and you should feel free to pause it or stop it, rewind it whenever you need to, because sometimes if I go too fast for you, then feel free, pause it, rewind it, what have you. The first thing I want you to write down is what I have highlighted up here, is that anything you do to one side of an equal sign, you have to do to the other side too. That is, you have to have balance. A lot of times we talk about equations in the concept of do they have balance? And so it's like if you had this little balance, and if you added something over here, it's going to get out of balance, and so you have to add it over here also. Or if you take this one away, then you have to take this one away also. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is equations, how to solve them, and keeping them balanced. Okay, and that actually is something we're going to write down about being balanced. So a statement where two expressions are equal or balanced. That's our definition of an equation. Anytime you have two expressions that have an equal sign in between them, that means that you have an equation. How to solve an equation? You find the value of the variable that will keep both sides of an equation equal or balanced. Now I just keep repeating that balance because it's a really important concept with equations. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 2. As I go through these also, which is also going to take some time in our video today, when I go through them, I'm going to be explaining my steps. I do not ask that you have to do that, but I'm doing it so that you can see what I'm doing. I would say that you should do it on these couple problems on this video, but when you get to your homework, you won't have to do it. Let me show you what I mean. The first step here is we're going to combine like terms. So I'm going to write over here, combine like terms. And some people, when they do their equations, they like to draw a line. You can do that if you want. I don't really do that very frequently, but if that helps you stay organized, certainly, absolutely you should do it. So I just brought down my 16, I brought down my equal sign, and 3a minus 5a, we talked about that last time, that's combining like terms, that's a negative 2a. So step 1 was combining like terms. Step 2 is going to be, what do I do now? I want to isolate my a. That's what I'm trying to do, is get that a all by itself. Well, how do I do that? I have to do the opposite operation. So since this is a times, then my second step is going to be to divide both sides by negative 2. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. On the left-hand side, that leaves me with a negative 8. I bring down my equal sign, and on the right-hand side, those 2's basically, you divide it out. A negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1, so this just leaves me a 1a, or like I said before, you can just call that a. And so your answer is 8 equals a. So my steps were combining like terms, number 2 was dividing by negative 2, and number 3, I'm just going to call that solving, or getting the answer. I will also say a lot of times when we have tests or quizzes, this would be a 3-point problem, because it would be 1 point for combining, 1 point for dividing, and 1 point for getting your answer. So that's another reason. But another reason I'm listing these out is when we get to some of our more geometry parts, we'll need to do this as well. Okay, let's look at number 3. If we look at what we have, we've got a lot going on here on the left. So once again, we need to combine like terms to start out. When I do that, let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to combine those up and I get 6 minus 5x. Remember that minus goes with the 5x. The minus does not go with the 1 or with the 5. It's 1 plus 5 and then minus 5x. Okay, I did my combining. Now this has a little bit more than we did on number 2. So I want to talk for a second about going how to solve. And last time we talked about PEMDAS, remember? Well, when we solve, we actually want to do PEMDAS backwards. So before we were simplifying, you use PEMDAS, but if you're solving, you do PEMDAS backwards. In other words, when I look at this problem, what I need to do is I need to do my adding and subtracting first. So I want to isolate that x, keep it all by itself. In order to do that, I need to do some adding and subtracting. I'm going to choose subtracting 6 from both sides. And then I'm going to go bring down what I need to bring down. So negative 24 minus 6 is negative 30. 6 minus 6 drops off, and I bring down my negative sign, and I bring down my 5x. So I subtracted my 6. Next thing I want to do is I need to divide by negative 5. So I'm going to divide this side by negative 5 and divide this side by negative 5. Remember, anything you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So if I subtract 6 here, I have to subtract 6 here. If I divide 5 here, I have to divide 5 here. And that is going to give me, I can use my calculator if I need to, that's going to give me 6 over here. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 drops off, so it's just x. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1. So that's why I'm saying it drops off. Okay, so again, you don't have to write down these steps in your homework, but I'm asking you to write them down in your notes because here's the deal. When you write it down, then you can go back and look at it again. Okay, let's look at numbers 5 and 6. Okay, if we go back and remind what we just did, we did both times, we did combining like terms first. On number 5, it does not have a combining like terms, but it does have a distribution. Now, do you remember yesterday I said that distributive and combining like terms are actually the same thing? So that's what I want to start with. I want to start with distributing on this one. Okay, so when I distribute, I bring down my negative 39, bring down my equal sign. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Negative 3 times a is negative 3a. I had it plus negative 3a. You could call it minus 3a. Either way is fine. All right, so we have that done. And again, let's go back and kind of peek at what we did before. Last time, this one we divided, this one we subtracted and then divided. We need to do PEMDAS backwards. So let's see what we have. If there's any adding and subtracting, we need to get rid of that first. And we do. We have this negative 15 that is added to the other one, so we can get rid of it. Now it's tricky because it's a negative 15, so we have to add 15. Even though this is a plus over here, I know that's confusing. And again, if we need to get out our calculator, you can certainly use your calculator on this. That is not a problem in this class at all. Okay, so our 15s drop off, our negative 3a gets brought down. Now we need to divide. I'm going to write down my steps. Okay, so our second step was to add 15. That's a 15. Try to make that top a little bit squarer so it looks like a 15. Our third step is to divide by negative 3. So that's where we're at now. We need to divide by negative 3. Again, you can use a calculator if you need to. Negative 24 divided by negative 3, that's 8. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, so that drops off, and we get 8 equals A as an answer. Okay, let's go on to number 6. Let me actually pause before we get to number 6. All of these problems, the reason I'm skipping the ones that I'm skipping is they're very similar to the ones we just did. And so that's why I feel like we don't have to do every single one, because some of them are like doubling up the same type of thing. But if you feel like this is still confusing, I need extra help, you watch the second video, and the second video will go through the ones that we skipped and a little bit more information for you so you can get that information. Okay, number 6 looks very strange, and a lot of people get kind of confused because there's a 0 there and they don't really know what to do with that 0. Well, Remember, our main goal is to isolate the variable, to get the a all by itself. We're still going to do the same steps we've been doing before. So before we started with combining or started with distributing. We don't have any combining or distributing to do. Our next step was to do subtracting or adding. Well, we do have subtracting and adding. We can do that. So let's start with that. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Okay, so I added 8 to both sides. Now I just need to get rid of that negative 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3, and that will give me my final answer. And so number 6 was a little bit tricky for a couple of reasons. First off, it had a 0. That confuses people. Secondly, when we got to the bottom, our answer is a fraction. You can leave it as a fraction. In fact, you should leave it as a fraction. Now, if you gave me a decimal, I probably wouldn't count it wrong, but I want to look back in your work and see, do you have a negative 8 over 3 somewhere? I also should mention that negative sign, it used to be on the bottom. I moved it to the top. It can be it can be a bunch of places. It can be on the 8, it can be on the 3, or it can be outside of it. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, what I mean is it could be negative 8 over 3, 8 over negative 3, or a negative 8/3. It's true that in this answer I made it like a slanted fraction. Some teachers don't like a slanted fraction, but I like them. Or it can be a flat fraction. Either way. Okay, just some things that we probably need to talk about. But we'll talk more. Remember, after we do these notes, we'll come back to class in our video or in our WebEx or whatever, and we'll discuss some of this stuff. So if you have questions, write down your questions on the paper somewhere. Why did you do this? Why not that? Okay, write it down, highlight it, something, so that when we come to our Zoom meeting, our WebEx meeting, that you can ask questions at that time. Okay, number 8, again, looks a little bit intimidating because it has a fraction. Don't be afraid of fractions. We can use calculators in this class, so fractions really shouldn't be a problem, but we definitely need to talk about them because I know a lot of people are scared of fractions. Okay, combining like terms or distributing? Nope, don't have any of that. Next thing, adding or subtracting? Yep, we have a negative 1. I need to add that 1 to both sides. Adding because it's the negative sign. The positive goes with the n over 10. The negative goes with the 1. All right, so we're going to add that, and we're going to bring down n over 10. And that gives me a 0 over here. I'm going to take a second to write down my steps. Okay, here's the deal with fractions. You want to multiply by the denominator. When I say multiply by the denominator, what I mean is, look at this fraction. It has a 10 in the denominator, that's the bottom. So we need to multiply by 10. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And when I do that, I'm going to put parentheses around it just to kind of clarify. But on the right-hand side, I'm going to say times 10. That's what I'm doing. On the left-hand side, I'm going to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing to both sides. But you know what? I'm going to call it 10 over 1. And the reason I'm going to call it 10 over 1 is that makes more sense to some people when we're multiplying fractions. In fact, I'm going to come over here and show you. So when we multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. Straight across the numerator, that's 10 times n. Straight across the denominator, 1 times 10 is 10. Then we can cancel those 10s, and we get our final answer of n. Now this little box over here, you don't have to write down if you don't want to because we're getting crowded, but I'm trying to show you how to multiply fractions and kind of why we're doing what we're doing. And so now I'm going to go to my fractions here, and that's what I get. This 10 and this 10 basically cancel each other out, and they leave me with an n. And on the right-hand side, 0 times 10 is 0. So the answer is 0. Some people think that means no solution. It does not mean no solution. It just means 0. Okay, and then my third step here would be to solve it or simplify it. So again, if this was a test or a quiz, I would give you 3 points for this problem. And we didn't show that third step over here, but that would probably be number 3, would be to solve or simplify. And same thing on number 5, step 4 would be to solve or simplify. So I'm just trying to show you what steps I'm doing. That's why I'm writing them down, and show you also how you would get points if this was a test or a quiz. Okay, we have one more example. So if you look at number 9, can you see what your first step is going to be? distribution, right? So we're going to go ahead and distribute that negative 8. That's going to give me a positive 40, because a negative times a negative is a positive. And if you want to call this plus negative 8, you can, or you can just call it minus 8. They mean the same thing. I forgot my x. Okay, next we are trying to simplify, trying to isolate, and so we need to subtract our 40. Okay, so we subtracted our 40. That gives me a negative 24. Bring down my equal sign, bring down my negative 8x, and now I need to divide by negative 8. And that is our solving, and that's our final answer. Now, I want to say a couple of things. Remember at the beginning I said that equations are the basis of algebra, so you have to know how to solve equations. If you felt like I was going too fast or I wasn't explaining things, couple of things. Don't feel anxious about that. Number one is I'm going to do another video and cover the ones that we skipped. Number two is we're going to go over them in our next meeting together. So next time we see each other, we'll practice this, and you'll get some time to practice with me. You'll get some time to practice with a group, and so hopefully you'll continue to get better at this. Okay, I know you will continue to get better at this. But for this video, this is the end of this video. If you feel like you need to watch the next one, you can. If you don't feel like you need to watch the next one, then you're done with the notes for today.